Hey, everybody. Welcome back to In Good Hands interviews with our incredible elite practitioners. I am so happy to be introducing Dr. Michelle Eads. If you haven't met her already, oh, she's been with us. One of our very first originals. You joined us back in February, but I know that you've been following Dr. Good now for maybe even a few months, but prior to that, but Dr. Michelle Eads, just a wonderful physician. I've gotten to know her a little more personally, and today we get to know her a little better. So excited for us. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Michelle.
My pleasure.
So first, I just want to know a little bit about your background. You have been in the medical field for many years. I'd love for you to start there, where you started from in medicine, and then how you ended up here doing your own practice.
Great question. So I trained as a family physician and did that for about 17 years. So I focused in functional medicine and limited my practice to that because there were so few of us at that time that were doing functional medicine, and let my family medicine be taken care of by other practitioners. And I learned about Dr. Bredesen's protocol with reversing and preventing cognitive decline. And that was very near and dear to my heart because it runs in my family. My grandmother passed from Alzheimer's, as did her only sibling, who is a chemical engineer for General Electric and actually created something like Silly Putty. He was a genius from what I was told. And their father, who got it in his 50s, which is quite early. And I, when I learned about that protocol, it's like I had a eureka moment and knew that's what I was supposed to do when I finally grew up. And I did that. I've been doing that now for 8 years, and have also been focused in the telemedicine practice so I can reach people in areas that are not in my backyard. And that way I can be accessible to them as opposed to them driving across 3 states to come to me, or leaving their home and whatever else, and just make it easier for them. And along that journey is when I stumbled across the plasmalogens, learning about those from Dr. Bredesen initially, and then, but didn't really latch onto that as well as I should have, because there's so many new things were coming at me at that point, new things I had not heard of before, even in functional medicine, to help people with cognitive decline. And I was blessed to have a patient that I shared with another practitioner. She had bipolar disorder, and she had a psychiatrist working with her. I was managing her cognitive decline, and she was in a wonderful facility that implemented the Bredesen protocol, and we'd already cleared out her mold toxicity and her mercury toxicity. She was in keto on a great diet, just a wonderful facility that does a lot of additive therapies. And he was managing her bipolar disorder, and he started adding in something I never heard of, these proton products, and I didn't know what they were, but I was like, okay, he's managing this part. And all of a sudden, her MoCA score, which stands for Montreal Cognitive Assessment, jumped several points in a very short time. And I was shocked. And so I asked the staff, what did you guys do?
Yeah.
What changed to my patient? I expected that kind of improvement, but I didn't think I'd see it for a year.
Oh, wow.
I didn't expect to see that jump of 5 to 6 points in just 3 months.
3 months. How old was this patient? Do you recall?
She was about mid-60s,
Oh, wow.
and that's when I started paying attention, because I knew that he'd started her on these. At this point, the plasmalogens were only available in the soft gels, and I'm thinking, this poor woman already has a bazillion pills she's taking. You're adding on 10 more pills in the morning, 10 more pills in the evening. How in the world is she going to take all this? They were able to get her to take all of it and saw the improvement. And I was just floored by that. So I was like, I've got to pay attention to this. What's happening? And so I started researching. I was like, wait a minute. Dr. Goodnow, this is the guy that Dr. Bredesen talked about a couple years ago. So that was literally 2 years ago in October that this lady experienced that improvement.
Oh,
And that's what got me first piqued my interest in what Dr. Goodnow is doing, and especially the plasmalogens. And I initially thought they were just for use for cognitive decline.
yeah.
I didn't realize it can be used for practically everything that I've been able to come up with. I'm kind of curious what we're going to learn to see if there's anything that the plasmalogens don't help.
That's a that's the $1,000,000 question. I mean, you and I were just talking before we started this recording about how good our skin is looking and how you're glowing. You're like, hey, I didn't change anything. I just added the plasmologist. I agree with that. As someone who's very skincare focused. But yeah, that's incredible. So it was you had heard about Dr. Goodnell's maybe name and research back 2 years when you got into the Bredesen, and then it took this one case. Were there other cases like this that really made you solidify this? Because you went from a family practice to a functional medicine practice, and now I think you have a specialty in treating dementia and Alzheimer's in addition to cognitive decline. Like, that progression is pretty huge. So there must have been other cases that led you to this, or at least some interest that formed. Can you think of anything else that comes to mind?
Mainly, I really felt like I was being led to focusing and specializing exclusively on preventing and reversing Alzheimer's. And when I did the initial Bredesen training back in 2017, I finished that training and I realized I have to limit my practice to just doing this because there's such a demand for it and there's so few people that are working on this, especially that are MDs and especially those that have functional medicine training. Because I think all of that together is kind of a unique combination that really serves these patients well. And it's a passion for me with it running my family, but also prior to that focus, I'd focused on cholesterol management and diabetes and prediabetes, essentially trying to prevent heart attacks and strokes and promoting longevity. And that segued very nicely into what's happening in the cognitive realm. And so I was also very adept at hormone replacement, had a lot of women coming to me, and I was going through that myself. And that's another piece that's part of the Bredesen protocol. So all that layered in very nicely. And I've felt very fulfilled and blessed to have a practice focusing on preventing Alzheimer's and giving people realistic hope that there's something that can be done and that they don't have to follow the same path that they saw their great grandmother, their grandmother, and their mom go through. It can stop with them and they can learn new skills and do things differently and not get it and grow old with their children and their grandchildren and have them not get it either.
Absolutely. So when your patients are coming to you for this, are they mostly coming out of a fear of not being in the same case as a loved one prior? Oh, wow. And then, so when you're talking about these new skills, like, how are you introducing them to it? Because a lot of people, plasmalogens is like this funny word. It sounds so like sci-fi, almost fake. So how are you having that conversation?
There's a lot of changes we do with the Bredesen protocol, and I layer the plasmalogens on that. And it's funny you mentioned the name. So my husband calls them plasmagics because he started that about 4 months after I started talking about them because I was just so excited about them and learning so much and reading the Dr. Goodnow's book and listening to his podcast and just trying to absorb everything I could because it's so different than anything I'd ever heard. And I'd had a lot of training before, but I'd never heard any of this stuff. So it's just a whole new realm that was opening up. And my husband had a hard time understanding the word too. And so that's where the word plasmagics came from because they kind of do work magic to some degree. Um, so it's just been a gradual process of, for me, incorporating it. And now at this point, I essentially introduce it to all of my patients because anyone who's seeing me that wants to either prevent cognitive decline down the road or try to stop in its tracks and hopefully reverse it, which is very difficult to do, but the plasmalogists make the chances much higher, especially if we can catch them earlier in the process as opposed to later in the process. And I've actually gotten to the point now where I have such strong belief in what the plasmalogens could potentially do. I don't want people to delay in getting started on them. So even people that are on my wait list, we introduce them to the plasmalogens and encourage them to start them even before they have their first appointment with me.
Wow. Is there, and how many of those patients on your wait list are actually doing it?
Probably about 50%.
That's amazing. That's incredible.
And so everyone that's pretty much everyone in my practice is over 50 for the most part. I occasionally get some younger than that, but most of the time people younger than that, they're not thinking about that stage of life yet. But anyone who's 50 and over that's a patient of mine or a loved one, I try to convince them to take the plasmalogens.
Yeah, yeah. Is it a hard convince? Like, are you really having to talk through like mechanisms and things of that nature, or what is that like?
So I share with them the things that plasmalogens do, especially in a brain that is potentially at risk of having decline down the road, and share with them it helps to address the major drivers of cognitive decline, but also support overall health. they're necessary, they're critical elements to life. And I explained to them if someone has a child that's born with a mutation where they can't make these plasmagics, that child doesn't live very long. It's heartbreaking. They're that important. We cannot live without them. And I explained to them how we all are under this tremendously toxic environment now with huge levels of oxidative stress. And most people have heard of that, including some of my older patients. They're now getting that, they've heard that jargon before, which makes it a lot easier to talk about this.
Yeah.
And if they haven't, I say it's kind of like rusting.
Yeah.
We don't want to be rusting. We want to be nice and squeaky clean, and our cells want to be clean so they can work properly. And these plasmalogens help protect us from that rusting and protect us from that oxidative stress. And they're critical building blocks for all of the surrounding membranes of all of our cells and all of the cellular components, especially the mitochondria. And most people have heard of mitochondria these days, and they realize that that's a big thing, the little powerhouses in our cells, the batteries in our cells to give us energy. And I also let them know how it helps protect us from toxicity and helps us deal with the toxicity. They're critical for nerve sending signals to the next nerve down the line. If we don't have the plasmalogens there, that transmission gets kind of gummed up and it doesn't happen very smoothly. It takes longer for a thought to make it through the brain. And a lot of them have experienced that, or they've seen someone who's had that cognitive slowing of their processing speed.
Absolutely. And so I'm curious to know where your position is on this toxicity. Like you mentioned that our environments are becoming increasingly toxic, but you're not talking about getting rid of that toxicity in your life. Like you're talking about like a better defense for it. So I think I might know the answer to this, but I would like to know like what is your stance on, okay, when you have this world that is so toxic, like do you have to do both? Do you recommend doing both? Or would you just say, hey, we have more control over one thing, let's do that one thing?
I'm not sure if I know what you mean by saying both, but
Yeah.
there's no way.
Removing the toxicity.
Yeah. So it's a lot easier to deal with the toxicity if we aren't constantly being doused with it every day. So if we can minimize our exposure through our food, through our air, through our water, through our laundry detergents, the things we put on our skin, all of that is potentially toxic, and we don't think about that. I didn't think about that until I went through training with that and had no idea. I realized I was poisoning my children with what I thought was good baby lotion for the time. So it's just interesting. You're not aware of this stuff until someone points it out. And I assumed that the government would make sure our stuff was clean that we're exposing ourselves to. I was very naive. So I've learned a lot since then. I learned to be very careful and reading labels. And we can't be 100%. There's no place on the planet we can get away from these toxins. And so we all need to be, in my opinion, detoxifying daily and supporting our detoxification processes. And the plasmalogens are a big part of that layer of protection as far as the antioxidants and that oxidative stress. And especially as we get older and we accumulate more and more oxidative stress and more exposure, it gets more difficult for us to make adequate amounts of plasmalogens. And that drives home with a lot of people because they understand as we age, things start going awry. They're not working as well. And a lot of it, of chronic disease, my belief is related to inflammation and oxidative stress.
Yeah.
And so I'm really curious what we can accomplish down the road if we can essentially quiet those down with plasmalogens, with eating clean, with making better choices, and try to limit our exposures to things.
So you had mentioned also that you help a lot of folks with their hormone imbalances, and that's such a big topic as we age. So what are you doing? What are you seeing when you're doing these other therapies? When you're combining it with other things, I'd love to know what those combinations are, in addition to what you're seeing on the results.
So the hormones are a critical piece, and I was always very much wanting to continue hormone supplementation for my patients, even when my World Health Initiative came out with their information, realizing that's quite jaded in this country where it's focused on the synthetic hormones. And fortunately, the bioidentical hormones are guilty by association, which is not what the research shows. And so the research, especially coming out of Scandinavian countries, show the bioidentical hormones are quite safe in most situations. And so I have a conversation with my patients on that. Most of them are women. Dementia affects mostly women as well. And so the big, and I explained to them that if you're going to grow a brain cell in a petri dish, you must have estrogen and progesterone in that environment for that brain cell to survive. That really drives home how important it is.
Right, right.
And a lot of ladies going through menopause, they all of a sudden start getting brain fog. They're often at a top part of their career, and all of a sudden their brain's not working as well. And it's a huge detriment
Mhm.
at that stage in life. And so a lot of them have either witnessed that or they've experienced it themselves.
Ah,
And most women feel better on hormones.
yeah.
Most of us don't feel so good when we don't have those hormones, not just including sexual health, but cognitive health and just overall sense of well-being, not to mention our bone density, our quality of sleep. So it does a lot of things. So hormones is a big part of what I do, but there's also other things we address with the Bredesen protocol. There's 6 main, drivers or pathways to causing dementia, and I think he named these in the order he discovered them as my guess, but I don't know that. The first one's inflammation.
Mhm.
Plasmalogens are wonderful at helping with inflammation from all different causes, but we want to decrease our exposure to that. But that's a big thing that the plasmalogens help with. But I try to educate people on how to minimize their exposure to inflammation from what they're consuming. A lot is coming from the gut,
Mm,
gluten and all the chemicals in our foods and things like that.
yes.
The next subtype is prediabetes and diabetes. I don't know if plasmalogens help that directly, but I'm curious. Dr. Goodnow might know, but I don't think would hurt. That's the only one that it may not directly be affected by plasmalogens to my knowledge. And the next is nutrients, having enough vitamins and building blocks for cell membranes and cells and nerves and transmission of the signals, the neurotransmitters, hormones. Well, the plasmalogens are definitely a big part of that.
Yeah.
And next is toxicity, whether it's from heavy metals, lime, other biotoxins like mold, and those often stir up a lot of inflammation in the brain too. And that's where the prodrome glia can be very helpful too. And then the next subtype is vascular, which is essentially cholesterol deposits
Mhm.
impeding the flow of blood to the brain. And I didn't realize when I first started in this journey that plasmalogens could help that. I assumed it was just going to help with the health of the nerves. And then I learned how important they are for maintaining vascular health.
Mm,
And the last one is trauma, head injuries.
mhm.
Well, we know that plasmalogens help with that too, even helping to recover from remote injuries from decades before.
So you have all of these tools. I love to hear about some of the other tools that you're using in your practice, whether it's a therapy, whether it's a type of, I don't know if you dabble at all with some of the anti-aging stuff, but would love to know outside of like the bioidentical hormones, is there anything else that you specialize in?
A lot of supplements, especially the plasmalogen, is a key part of that. Vitamin D, vitamin K2, a lot of that usual stuff. The hormone support.
Yeah.
As far as sleep, is a big deal for a lot of people. So we're screening for sleep apnea or low oxygen. I'm in Colorado, and at altitude, a lot more of us get a lot lower at night than we do at sea level. And so I'm screening pretty much all of my patients with a home testing device
Oh,
uh, to see what their oxygen level is. Dr. Bredesen wants us to be 95% or higher, even when we're asleep. And that's nearly impossible at this altitude.
wow.
So it's challenging. Most of us are doing okay with that, but insurance will not help pay for therapy, for oxygen therapy or CPAP, unless you're getting below 88%, which at that point, that is a real strain on the brain, the heart, and the kidneys.
Oh,
A lot of people don't realize they're having that as an issue until we look for it.
right, right, right.
So that's one of the big things we do. Also, just helping to support sleep. Hormones are a big part of that. Meditation, using some other devices to help with light and visual stimulation, to help with neuroplasticity, and to help with anxiety, to help with sleep, other forms of meditation, just to kind of help settle the brain down and help with a lot of other things too. Because people are often anxious because they're concerned about their future. They've seen horrible things usually in their family or close friends, and they don't want to go down that path. And they're nervous. They don't know, is this going to work? Because this is still fairly new. We've only been doing this. Dr. Bredesen's Recode protocol came out, I think, in 2016. So we're not even 10 years into this yet.
Mm. love that you're checking for this sleep oxygen. I have never heard of anyone talking about this. Like, that's super cool. Are you finding that because of your location, maybe that's the case, but are you finding that the majority of your patients are below the 95% recommendation?
Probably below 95%, yes, at this altitude.
Uh-huh.
Most people, because most of my patients are 50 or older, and we know as we age, our pulmonary function, our lung function slowly declines. And if nothing else will kill us, that eventually will. But at this altitude, typically a 20-year-old will be fine at night.
Mhm.
All of us, we don't breathe as deeply at night when we're asleep,
Mhm, mhm.
do when we're awake. And so for most of us, we drop a few points. You go to your doctor's office, they usually check your pulse ox on your finger and see what your oxygen level is. When we're awake, it's usually fine.
Yeah.
But especially at altitude, when we're sleeping, that's when it can get lower, even if someone doesn't have sleep apnea. They're
Right.
not holding their breath, they're just not breathing as deeply or as frequently. And I have several patients that live at a lower altitude, but also have a mountain home, higher altitude, and we can see a huge change with that altitude as well. And so not everyone is bad enough that we need to give them extra oxygen. I usually have the cutoff closer to 90% because there's a better chance of insurance helping out with that, unless they can finance that on their own.
Mhm.
Uh, but it's good to find out. I
Yeah.
have some people that do great, but a lot of people, they weren't expecting to find that their oxygen was low.
Oh.
That's unless you look.
Oh my god, and that's like a basic human need. It is water and oxygen, one of the 2 basic. Wow, the pulmonary function also dropping by aging. I just never even assumed that that was a thing. I just yeah, we just accept that aging and hormones. No one's ever talking about the pulmonary function. So that's a really cool tip. Thank you for that, Dr. Easy. Learn something new from our elites all the time. I love that. So outside of the CPAP, just on this pulmonary thing, because you just brought it to our attention, how are you also helping if you're not able to get a CPAP? Are there any other strategies to improve this function?
Uh, well, losing weight can help if
Ah,
they're 50 pounds overweight. To think of them laying on their back, that's a lot of weight on their chest and their belly, usually working against them breathing. It also, their neck is usually fatter with a lot of extra fat deposits in their neck. So the weight loss, which usually comes fairly easily with getting into ketosis, which is something else we recommend for brain health and just overall health. Our body prefers to get energy from ketones as opposed to from sugar. It's just a lot cleaner fuel for us. Um, so those things will usually all help with the oxygen. Sometimes we'll just give them supplemental oxygen and they may not need CPAP. Other people, they do better with CPAP and they don't need the extra oxygen on top of that. They just need to have the air going in and out, and that's fine to use the room air. Other people can't tolerate that CPAP. They now have some other ways of, like, there's a surgical implant you can give that helps to keep the airway open. I haven't had anybody do that yet, but that's a thing that's out for I don't know, a year or two now. Some people, because they don't want to do the CPAP, they can also go to a dentist and get an appliance made, or even get the top of their mouth widened to allow more room for air to come in and out over their tongues. There's a lot of things that can be done.
That's very cool. Oh my gosh. I love that your approach to things is always kind of a very natural, right? Very non-chemical, we're not adding more prescriptions to our life. Like that seems to be what I'm getting from you as the initial reaction to things, which is just that's what that's who I would want to see as a doctor, to be honest. Not someone who's gonna just recommend every drug under the sun, which is yeah, too much of that these days. My goodness. Okay, so from the clinical standpoint, when you're measuring these things, when patients are coming to you for return visits, like how are you showing improvements? Are you using any specific labs? Are you asking any specific questions that really like draw light bulbs to your patients and then get even more buy-in from them?
Well, usually they start noticing, or their spouse, their family, their roommate starts noticing that they're not forgetting things as much. For people that are already having symptoms, I also do a standard cognitive assessment called the MOCA, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, that I can do virtually like this, and that's kind of a standard way of measuring. There's also online computer-based tests that they can do for cognitive evaluations, such as CNS, which stands for Central Nervous System, vital signs. And that's something they can get through the Recode protocol with Dr. Bredesen. Their website is Apollo Health, and as having a subscription to that, which I require my patients to have because there's a lot of wonderful educational tools on that website, fantastic guides, videos, tons of learning that I just don't have time to share with each individual person. So that's a wonderful treasure trove that they can access. But they also get access to cognitive evaluations on there, also brain games. And so I track how they're doing on the brain games. How are they doing? How are they doing with the cognitive assessments?
Love that.
In addition to following lab results, what is their hemoglobin A1C doing? The average of their sugar levels over the past 3 months, has that gotten better? What are their cholesterol levels doing? Which my interpretation of that has changed since learning from Dr. Goodnow, and knowing what are actually healthy cholesterol levels. What are their hormone levels? What are their thyroid levels? What is their CRP? Looking at their carotid scan to see if we have nice, clean, healthy, young arteries, or if we've got blocked up old curmudgeon arteries that we need to get cleared out.
I'm curious. I always ask this with each one of my practitioners that specialize in like gut health. What are some of the gut health labs that you use?
So for people, especially that are having symptoms, I'll do stool studies, poop testing. Those are always the favorite tests for people to do.
Oh yeah.
But it can give us information we can't get any other way, at least not at this point. And we can find out what's happening in their gut microbiome. And do they have a lot of inflammation? Do they have leaky gut? Do they have a lot of thugs running around the community of their gut? And do they have enough police to keep them under control? And so a lot of good information with that. Are they digesting things well, especially fats? Because with the ketogenic diet, we want them to have higher amounts of healthy fats. If they can't absorb that, that doesn't help. I want them to be able to absorb all their nutrients in a very nutrient-rich diet, but also the supplements that I'm asking them to take. And they have expensive poop. I want them to absorb all those.
Expensive poop. That's awesome. And so you're educating your patients a lot, like way more than I've seen like the typical practitioners that we've met. You're actually you want them to sign up for education platforms. Now, how much buy-in are you getting from that? Are they enjoying that?
Oh, yes.
Ah,
Early on, I had a couple, most of the time I have a 2-for-1 special. When I have a patient, I also have their spouse, somebody else, their care support partner,
yeah.
to help keep them on track. And it's a very difficult protocol. We ask them to do so much, but they realize it's a high stakes game that we're playing. It's a critical game that we've got to win at if we can. And one of my early couples, they were challenged financially, and the husband was a retired engineer taking care of his wife, and she was doing okay, but we're trying to get her better. And he really valued that website, and all the information he could get from that. And that really drove home how important it was. And early on, when that website wasn't as robust as it is now, I was trying to mimic the same kind of information. I would give people a 2-inch binder
Wow.
information, just educating them on things. Then I realized this platform is so much better quality, lots of great information. They're going to continue to improve that. Okay, I'm not going to fight this anymore. Let's just use that. It also lets us generate what's called recode reports.
Uh-huh.
And also pre-code, which is for preventing cognitive decline, pre-code reports. That is kind of a shallow dive into what could be causing issues, and that helps guide me where I need to look deeper
Wow.
on a functional medicine perspective to figure out what's going on. So it's kind of looking under the hood for certain things, as opposed to doing $1 million workup on everybody and being more precision approached as far as what is going awry in this individual's brain or what's threatening their cognition versus the next person.
Wow, I love that. And then I love that you mentioned that they were, they had a budget, and even though they had a budget, they're allocating that budget very smartly to this educational platform. Not even a thing, not even something you take. It's a education platform.
Yeah.
That what a great story. Do you know if that patient is still on the platform, like still learning? Are they continuously adding to this platform?
As far as I know, because they do keep adding more educational pieces to it. Dr. Bredesen gets on there and has monthly town halls, as he calls them, with the patients, and he has a separate one with practitioners
Yeah.
where we can ask questions, and that's always very helpful too. But it also gives them access to generate those recode or pre-code reports. It gives them access to the brain gym, the brain games. So lots of good stuff there. Um, and it's just a cheap, easy way to get really good basic tests. And some of them are unique where insurance would never cover them or rarely cover them. But insurance is not about trying to improve your future lifestyle or life choices and your lifespan, health span, brain span. And that's where I encourage people to invest in that so that they can utilize that and not rely on their insurance because their insurance isn't going to give them that information, unfortunately.
Oh, jeez. Well, we're hoping to change that soon, right? We have to go to
Yes.
well, Dr. Ease, what are you most excited about that's happening in your practice? Like, I want to know what your big goals are.
Oh, I love how the layering on the plasmalogens to what I've already been doing has really boosted people's improvement, especially those that have neuroinflammation, that are having inflammation in their brain. And there's a fairly new blood test that's come out through Apollo Health with Dr. Bredesen that's called Brain Scan. And it's a 3-in-1 blood test that looks at ultrasensitive test for p-tau 217, which is a biomarker for the amyloid deposits. And then there's another one called GFAP, glial fibrillary acidic protein, which has to do with inflammation of the brain. And that's the only test I'm aware of that actually tells us if there is inflammation happening in the brain or not. And the last one is NFL, not the football, but neurofilament light, which is measuring damage to the actual neuron itself. For example, MS, ALS could show that type of damage, and also brain trauma. So it helps me, especially for people I'm having a hard time pinpointing what could be the main drivers that we're trying to turn around. That's really helpful to uncover those. And I've been amazed with the ones that have had high amounts of neuroinflammation. We can really douse out that fire pretty well with higher doses of the prodrome neuro and with the glia, especially because we know their myelin has suffered because those poor oligodendrocytes have not been able to keep up with the damage that's constantly occurring to the myelin sheath, the insulation on those copper wires that connects our brain cells and helps the signal get moved along. And so people that are often having very agitated, having a hard time sleeping, anxious, that's another way it often I've observed it seems to manifest if they're having a lot of inflammation in their brain. Um, and that's been very nice to see them kind of calm down and settle down and be easier to work with. The family appreciates that. So, and some of them are able to get some cognitive improvement, but it kind of depends on how far along they are. Because once they get so far along, it's really hard to heal the brain enough to get improvement.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why prevention is so much better. I liken it to we want to be able to turn the Titanic miles before it hits the iceberg. And some people, they are right on top of the iceberg, and it's almost impossible to get them turned around. And that's why I really encourage people to start this sooner than later.
Yeah.
And even at conferences, I'll run into other practitioners that have Alzheimer's that runs in their family, and they'll ask me, "What can I do?" And I tell them, to be honest, the best thing you can do other than having a clean, healthy lifestyle like they are already doing, exercising, sleeping well, all that stuff, the stress management, is to take plasmalogens because that's their best insurance policy, in my opinion, to avoid developing that down the road, especially doing that before they're having symptoms.
Mm-hmm. Ah, that's the goal right there is catching him early. And you mentioned that, most of your patients are at ages 50 and above. Are you getting any of those patients like bringing in their kids or asking about their kids and how they can prevent or just keep them a little healthier? Are you getting more of that these days?
So most of the ones that are younger in my practice are the children of my patients that are farther along. And they're very much aware that there's things that can be done. And gosh, if we'd known about this 20 years earlier for mom wouldn't be in this situation. And so they realize, okay, I want to do this now. But yes, they're also learning valuable skills on what kind of foods to eat, how to prepare them without damaging them, and encouraging more oxidative stress in our bodies, different lifestyle choices that they can embrace and then teach to their children and their grandchildren.
I know that you are very diet focused. And whenever we do our elite practitioner events, I always make sure that there are plenty of gluten free options available. So I've got to just assume that you live a very gluten-free lifestyle, but what other kinds of dietary um, strategies do you use for yourself?
Great question. Gluten is actually a battle in our house because my husband is the son of wheat farmers. So it's been interesting in our household. So yes, I have my meals that are gluten free, but I use a supplement if we go out and I want to have some bread or pasta
Oh,
um, as kind of a cheat day that helps to mitigate the damage that happens from consuming gluten. So I like having that with me. Uh,
that's cool.
but and can I actually mention that here?
Absolutely, please.
So the one I like is from Designs for Health,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it's called Allergy, like a capital G, Allergy Zyme, like enzyme.
Oh.
And it's designed for celiacs so that when they go out to eat and get some incidental exposure, it's not so damaging for them. But I recommend it for all of us that want to have a piece of wedding cake and not have such a bad problem from it. And so I actually keep a bottle, a little bit of it in my pill purse, packet in my purse, so I can just use it on the spot if I need to. Uh, but other things like preparing food a little bit differently. In general, the high heat is what's very damaging to food, especially processed food and ultra processed food. But even whole foods, if we cook them at too high of a temperature, that's quite damaging to them.
Right.
And oils in particular can become rancid with that. And so a lot of recipes now are trying to be healthy by saying use olive oil for this. Olive oil is not meant to be exposed to temperatures above about 320 degrees. And so you want to use olive oil as a finishing oil, which means after you take the pan out of the oven or after you take the pot off the stove, it's no longer exposed to the heat, then you drizzle the olive oil on it, not baking with it. But there are other oils that are great to use for that higher temperature heating, like avocado oil, which has a more savory taste, coconut oil for sweeter things. So I use coconut oil spray if I'm making pumpkin protein muffins or something like that. Um, Also, macadamia nut oil is another good one as a savory, nutty flavor. So those are the oils I have on by my stovetop, and I also have the olive oil to put on afterwards. And then cooking things at lower temperatures. So I never I never bake at 350 degrees anymore. Everything is set at 325. I just bake longer
Hunger.
or even 300 if I'm really concerned about, especially animal products. So anything with eggs, with meat, fish, anything like that, those animal products, those are the ones that are damaged when they're exposed to those higher temperatures. Vegetables can handle it pretty well. So they can tolerate, broiling even. But it's the oils on them, you've got to be careful. You want to make sure they have a high enough smoke point where they're not damaged in the process.
So that's a real thing. So grilling is like the wrong thing. Maybe a slow cooker is a good thing, right?
Yeah. I love using my crock pot. I don't know if Instapot's a problem. I think the moisture helps with that.
Yeah, yeah,
I use my Instapot quite a few times too, but part of it is just how to prepare food without damaging it incidentally.
wow. And I know that there's a whole new fad going around about the AGEs that are
Yes,
produced from high temperature cooking.
right. The advanced glycation end products.
Yeah, that's wow, it happens in the food.
Mhm.
Not just inside our bodies, happens in the food that we're consuming that. Oi, this world.
Because if we're having to constantly rebuild our body, our body is extremely dynamic. It is not static. It's constantly replacing membranes, cells, tissues. Everything is being like our bones are replaced every 5 to 7 years. And so our body's constantly having to repair and replace things. And if all we're giving it is junk,
Yeah.
it's thinking, you're giving me this to rebuild your body? Okay. How good is your body going to be if that's the case?
Wait a second. It just processed in my head. You're saying that our bones are regenerating every 6 to 7 years. Like it's oh wow. Your bones just aren't what they are. Oh my gosh.
And that's happening for all of our tissues.
Oh my goodness.
I don't know. Our neurons usually last longer. Dr. Goodnow can probably tell us how long they last, but we have some of those that last our entire lifetime. But the majority of our body is constantly being replenished. And if we don't have healthy building blocks, if we've got ones that are chewed up and riddled and moth-eaten and aren't very high quality,
Burnt, grilled.
that's all that our body has to build stuff with.
Oh, geez, that's another level of understanding what it is that food is medicine. It's so important. us what we're eating. Oh, geez. These are some amazing tips, Dr. Eats. Thank you so much for sharing. And, and we don't have to be a patient of yours to get this incredible advice. So I appreciate it so much that you're sharing this incredible advice. But Dr. Eats, how can patients reach you? What's your website? What's your clinic name? We didn't even start with that.
So my clinic is Pinnacle Functional Medicine. And I have a website. You can get there by my name, michelleeadsmd.com. But also you can search for Pinnacle Functional Med and find me that way as well. But at this point, I don't see this changing. I mean, I completely focus on those that are wanting to preserve and maintain and improve their cognitive function. So I no longer focus on people that just want to get hormones or just want to take care of the celiac. I kind of do everything under that umbrella of cognitive health.
So there's something interesting that you wanted to include, right, Dr. Eats?
Yes, so both of my sons have recently gotten engaged. So it's been a lot of fun at our house lately. And the neat thing is their brides are also in the same community as we are. And so we're having some fun conversations. One of my sons wants to go into medicine as well. And they are very much aware of autism and how that has been increasing. And they're very curious if there's things that they can do to try to stack the odds in their favor of not having a child with autism or other issues. And they know that I've been doing plasmalogens and doing a lot of training and talking about these plasmagics. That's how we call them in our family. And so they are very interested in how we can try to especially get moms healthy before they conceive and during pregnancy to try to help have as healthy a baby as possible. And so we've been talking about detoxing. We've been talking about starting plasmalogens, especially the prodrome glia, to try to support the myelination, and especially running into there's a baby there in the prodrome world that will be in our conferences that is the chillest, happiest baby I've ever seen. I'm thinking, oh my Lord, if babies could be like that. And she's been on the plasmalogens since before she was born. And I think that's had a tremendous impact. And I'm looking forward to more research coming out on that. But I definitely plan on trying to have both of my future daughters-in-law take plasmalogens, especially the glia, to try to have healthy grandbabies.
Oh, genius grandberries. My theory is that that plasmalogen baby that you're referring to, she has an older brother too, that's 2, and she's about to turn 1 soon, or might have already turned 1. But they're gonna be so incredibly smart and centered and a just not having to deal with that inflammatory issue, the myelination issue. I love that. That's wonderful coming. I love hearing that from more MDs because I think that's one of the biggest questions that we just can't answer because it's just not we're prodrome science is not an MD. So the more that doctors, physicians are talking about the safety of this, how they would use it even on their own families, that's huge. So thank you for that addition. I think we all needed that. Dr. Eads, folks, she's one of our incredible elite practitioners, and you can see why. She has such a foundational approach to how you're going to live so much better in your life, and of course, keep that brain firing on all cylinders. Dr. Eads, thank you so much for your time on this and spending this Friday with me. And folks, make sure you reach out to Dr. Eads if you have any of these concerns, because as you can see, she is one of our valued, incredible experts. So thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Bye, everybody.